Okay, so let's have a quick look at our agenda on what we're going to be talking about here today. We have a jam-packed agenda. If it's the first time for you joining us here at the webinar, let me tell you, we always have a lot of content to get through. What I can recommend you to do, put all your other devices aside, switch off MS Teams. The good point of us using Zoom is that you can turn off MS Teams completely and just focus on us and on that topic, namely customer centricity. And I would like to kick that off with that definition of customer centricity, because I'm very well aware that probably we all have different definitions of what customer centricity actually means, what this buzzword actually translates into in our day-to-day lives as sales managers. So we're going to be starting with that. And I then want to go straight into the topic of today's presentation, namely, why do so many customer centricity initiatives fail? I know that we have a lot of experienced, salespeople in today's call, and I'm 100% sure that you probably went through in your careers to many, many different iterations of making your organization, your company more customer-centric. And the question really is, why do we need to go through these cycles over and over again? Why are we failing, allegedly or apparently, with coming close or getting closer to the customer for good? So we'll, lift the carpet here a little bit to see what's actually happening in reality. And I also want to, provide you with something that you can pretty much take home out of this webinar. I want you to provide you with some nuggets of value that you can use, some tips and tricks that you can apply to turn yourself and your team a little bit more customer-centric after today's webinar. Okay. Obviously, we have also a Q&A session. So while I'm presenting, don't feel shy to put your questions already into the Q&A tab. As I mentioned earlier on, Ivan again will be monitoring those questions, and we will be addressing hopefully all of them towards the end of today's webinar. A quick introduction of who we are as FIVIS. If you haven't come across us yet, we are a training and corporate consultancy company here based in London. And our motto and our mission, quite frankly, what I always say, the reason why I get out of bed every morning is we want to build bridges between procurement and sales, between customers and their suppliers, between sellers and buyers. We fundamentally believe there's tons of value that just a way to be unlocked if both sides were to collaborate better, if both sides were to interact with each other in a more customer-centric way. So we are spending a lot of time with sales organizations and companies such as yourselves to make you aware how your customers buy and how they want to be sold to, how you can activate a customer centricity mindset to become that supplier of choice and don't stay that provider by chance. And we believe we are very good at this because all of us, all of the trainers and coaches at FIVIS, we've all been on your customer side for many, many years. We've been working for decades in procurement teams and on your customer side, and we really know how your customers want to be sold to and how you should sell to them. Okay, but enough about us. Let's talk about the topic of today, namely customer centricity. And quite frankly, I would like to first assess you a little bit, or I would like you to invite to assess yourself on how customer-centric you are. So what we will do is the following. I will be providing you with 3 questions, very simple questions, or statements rather, and I want you to rate yourself, very, objectively on these statements. If these statements are true on how you interact with your customer, or if these statements are not so true on how you interact with your customer. Be open and honest to yourself. We will not be sharing this with your manager. We will not be sharing this with your customer. This is just a quick self-assessment that you can do to learn a little bit on how customer-centric you actually are. So I'll share this questions with you now. So here's question number 1. Again, similar to before, just put in your answer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into the chat window of Zoom, and that will then automatically populate in that presentation that you see on your screen. So here comes the first statement that I would like you to contemplate and to think of. I can name the 3 biggest growth opportunities my customer is pursuing right now and what is currently blocking each. So reflect about this statement. Is this something that you can sign up to say, yes, I absolutely have an overview on what the 3 biggest growth opportunities are for my customer? And that would say, I rate myself as a 5. Or you say, well, no, not really. I have no clue what their growth opportunities are. So I rate myself rather a 1. So put into the chat window now 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending upon where you think you see yourself currently with regards to that statement. Just read it out once more. I can name the 3 biggest growth opportunities my customer is pursuing right now and what is currently blocking each. Okay. Let's give you a few more minutes here to put your answers in. All right. Here comes statement number 2. Also the same approach. Please just put your answer into the chat window of Zoom. Here's the next statement. I know what my main competitor does better than I do and why that matters to the customer. Is that something that you can relate to? Then you score yourself a 5. Or you'd say, well, I'm not really sure. I have actually no clue who my competitor is and why they are important to my customer. Again, 5 means is you're very much familiar with your competitors. 1 means you have not really an idea on how your competitors impact the relationship with your customer. Okay, and here comes the last question. I have a specific action plan I'm currently executing to improve the relationship with named actions, named action owners, and define outcomes. So do you have an action plan in place with named actions, named action owners, and define outcomes to work with your customer to improve the relationship? If that is all in place, rate yourself a 5. If it's not in place at all, rate yourself a 1. And be open and honest to yourself. Again, we're not going to be sharing this here with anybody but our little family here. So don't be afraid to be totally transparent here. Okay, very good. So this was just a very quick self-assessment on your level of customer centricity. And we've picked 3 questions out of the 25 questions that we would normally ask you to really get a grip on how much you think you're thinking and acting in a customer-centric way vis-a-vis your customer. We'll be coming back to these questions and the overall results towards the end of today's presentation. And we'll be revealing how customer-centric this group is actually thinking that they are based on these 3 questions that we just asked you, right? But first, thank you very much for contributing to this, and let's head back to our presentation. This self-assessment is super important and actually addresses a fundamental issue or a challenge that we see with a lot of supplier organizations. And one study that really caught our eye here as a team is the study by Bain that says that 80% of companies believe they are customer-centric. So they are filled in this questionnaire similar to what you just did and rated themselves very, very highly with regards to how they interact with the customer, that they're really creating value for their customer, that they're there for their customer. But on the flip side, when you ask these exact same customers on how they perceive their customers to be, only 8% of them agree with their customers. So there's a massive disconnect on how we see ourselves as supplier and how our customers perceive us. And I wanted to visualize this a little more because this is not just a rounding error. This is not just a little blip that we need to be addressing here. This is actually a massive gap. You as the supplier might be looking to resolve an issue which is actually not really an issue, right? You might be thinking, I lost sales with my customer. I'm not being considered for it in a tender process. The contract is not being renewed. My customer is not interacting with me any longer. And you might be looking to resolve an issue which might be more related to marketing or to operations or to come up with a new product, while the real issue is your level of customer centricity and how you are actually perceived from the customer side. So this is the gap that we need to be addressing. And the problem is that most of us are actually not aware that this is the fundamental problem that needs to be resolved for. Unfortunately, and this is the unfortunate truth before we continue here, is that you might be part of that problem in the end of the day, right? You might be fooling yourself to a certain degree as well, that you might be thinking that you're customer-centric. You might have answered very highly or rated yourself very highly with regards to those questions that we just exposed you to. But if you were to ask your customer, they might not be necessarily agreeing to that. And in this webinar today, we would like to give you some tools and tips and tricks on how you can identify this gap and how you can actually close this gap so that you can build that winning relationship that you're after with your customer accounts. What we should remember is that our perception actually doesn't really matter, right? Not your perception is reality. It is your customer's perception that defines actual reality. It is what they say and what they consider to be customer-centric is actually what is customer-centric, right? And the customer's perception is what we need to be identifying, what we need to find out. What is it actually that they're after for us to do to be, addressing their needs in the way they want them to be addressed? Our studies actually confirm what we've just learned from that Bain study that I mentioned, this 80% and 8%. So we've interviewed over the last 12 months 360 sales managers, and we asked them 25 questions, similar to the question that you've just answered yourself there at the beginning of this webinar. And they rated themselves, very highly with regards to their customer-centric mindset. They rated themselves at a 4.2. When we then looked into what happens in reality, when we assess them on their behaviors, on their actions, on how they execute on being customer-centric in that relationship with their customer accounts, the results actually changed quite significantly down to a 2.3. So the problem is real, right? We all are in this world, or in this perception that everything is rosy, while our customer is actually not seeing that way at all. And this is the problem that we need to be addressing and that we want to be addressing here in this webinar today. Let's have a look into the gap for, or the reason for this gap in perception, right? Why are we not seeing what our customers are seeing? Why are we not, seeing the signals that apparently the customer is sending to us? Why are we only living with the consequences, namely lost sales, lost deals, and not that relationship that we're actually after? So let me give you a few explanations, and some of those might be some hard truths, but we'll start easy. The first one is our mind plays a trick on us. If I would have asked you before we started today's session individually, are you customer-centric? Are you focused on your customer? I would say probably a good 95% of you would have said, of course, Jens. Could I be better how I deal with my customer? Of course, but generally, I'm very customer-centric. And we probably, or you probably would have thought about an event that you just recently had with your customer, a good, contract negotiation, or a deal got extended, or you had a great dinner with someone, or you invited somebody to a innovation event and everything went, very, very good. So you reflected back on those, instances which were really positive and reflected those on the overall relationship, which not necessarily means that you are actually being perceived by your customer as a customer-centric supplier. So our mind plays a trick on us when we need to assess ourselves on how customer-focused we are. The other problem is, or the challenge with customer centricity, to resolve for customer centricity or to get better with regards to customer centricity, is that nobody deliberately comes into the office in the morning harming the customer, sabotaging the relationship with the customer. Everybody's coming to the office generally, right, to create value with the customer. I'm 100% sure that all of you, when you left to the office this morning, had in mind to do something positive with the customer. So it's very difficult actually to pinpoint down actions and behaviors that are actually not beneficial to the customer relationship, because generally we're all in that mindset of doing something good. Another issue why we have this gap is, and this might be a little bit of a hard truth there, and I hear this all the time from many sales organizations in particular, is customer centricity doesn't need to be starting with us. We as sales team, we're super customer centric. It needs to be the other person, the other function. If operations, if our leadership team would be thinking and acting a bit more in a customer-centric way, then we as sales professionals, we as sales teams could be much more customer-centric as well. So it's more the other person that needs to move first before we have to do our own job or our own improvements with regards to customer centricity. And this is a little dangerous, right? Because we might be, again, fooling ourselves here that we're doing the right thing, just waiting for the other function to move first before we reconsider and reflect on what we can be doing better in the interaction with our customer. The difficulty is, and you might have experienced that throughout your careers when you were exposed to customer centricity initiatives, that mostly the guidance is lacking, right? If I tell you you're not customer centric, please change, you obviously need guidance on what you have done previously wrong to be able to change your behaviors. But most of these customer centricity initiatives that we're observing and that you have experienced probably give you something like maybe care a little more about the customer, be there for your customer, focus more on your customer. So it doesn't really describe to you what actually has, what you've done wrongly before and what you need to be changing to be more customer centric. And generally, what we also observe when we go out and talk about customer centricity is that customer-centric or knowledge about customer-centric behaviors is lacking within organizations. What customer centricity means and how that translates into actions and behaviors of individuals and organizations is normally or mostly not present in organizations. And that is a real problem. And I would like us to tackle that particular point first. Let's build some knowledge what customer centricity actually means. And the best way to do that, well, is to look into some literature, into academia, what the smart guys actually talk and say about customer centricity. And if you're not, you don't need to go through many books there yourself. We've done the job for you here. I'll be presenting you some research that has galvanized what customer centricity is all about. And I have to apologize, the next slide is a little bit text heavy, but bear with me, it's going to be worth your while delving into that area of customer centricity a little bit more. So first of all is Peter Fader, that you might be familiar with. He's a professor at Wharton. Some call him the godfather of customer centricity. In his book in 2020, he came up with the following definition of customer centricity. And let me just quickly read his statement out to you. Customer centricity is a strategy that aligns a company's development and delivery of its products and services with the current and future needs of a select set of customers in order to maximize their long-term financial value to the firm. It's a little bit of a complex and complicated sentence, and you probably have to read it a couple of times to fully understand it. But I want you to focus or put your attention on the following element of this statement: a select set of customers. So what Peter Fader is pretty much saying is, if you want to be customer-centric, or what customer centricity is really all about, is to focus your energy not on all customers, but just only on a select few, on those where it really matters most. It's totally okay if you have a bunch of transactional customers, which you put on the back burner. You still do business with them, but you probably don't invest so much time and resources to build that close relationship with them. If you treat every customer the same, your customer centricity initiatives will fail. So this is a very important point on what customer centricity is. It's focusing on those customers that really matter to your business, that really create value for you as a supplier. Shah et al. Also has a great definition here, or they come up with a great definition of customer centricity. Let me read it out to you as well. The true essence of customer centricity lies not in how to sell products, but rather on creating value for the customer and in process, creating value for the organization. Again, a very important point to remember on what customer centricity is. Customer centricity is not something altruistic. And I hear this often from sales managers that say, well, customer centricity means that I always need to give, that I need to be there for the customer, and then they drop me like a hot potato. This doesn't make any sense. And this is absolutely not what customer centricity is. The idea of customer centricity is that you invest resources in a select few customers, and they give you a return on your investment. If that return on your investment is not there, well, then these customers are probably not the customers that you should be building close relationship with. Lastly, customer centricity is to look at an enterprise from the outside in rather than the inside out, to the lens of the customer rather than the producer. And this is something that I feel many organizations still today are not really doing well. Many of you are very product-centric, are very supplier-centric. You're in your own rhythm, and you don't really bring the outside view into the into your own organization. The voice of your customer is not really activated to understand what you need to be doing differently to serve them in a customer-centric way. So these are three very good definitions already for us to better understand what customer centricity is. We need to select a few customers only and determine what is really worth our while, with which customers is worth our while to establish a closer relationship. We need to make sure that we always get a return. It needs to be a win-win. And lastly, we need to make sure that we rethink on how we operate and create an outside-in view. How we operate from a customer's point of view and not just us pushing product over the fence, wishing our customer accounts good luck with that. Okay. What is the problem with these definitions? I think they're conceptually very good, but there's problems with them. And here's the problems that I see with them. First of all, they're very conceptual. If you were to give these definitions now back to your organizations, or if you were telling your team, look, this is what customer centricity is, go out and execute, probably your team and the organization would be struggling. They're very, 40,000 feet level kind of, definitions of customer centricity. What does this really mean for my organization? You might be wondering, what do I need to individually do differently now to create that win-win, to select the right customers, et cetera, et cetera. So academia is good. It's a starting point, but it's not the end of all. We're still missing something here to really pinpoint down what we need to be doing to be activating the customer centricity mindset in our organization. So let's switch gear and look into how some companies actually do execute on their customer centricity initiatives. And I've selected a few examples here. And this is not a name or shame. These are real life examples on how organizations activate a customer centricity mindset within the organization. And again, it's not a name or shame. I don't want to point any fingers here. Obscured also the names of the companies. This is just to see and reflect together on how our customer centricity initiatives looking like today. And you might or may be able to relate to some of those in what happens actually in your own organization. So this is one example with a large logistics provider. This is an image of their warehouse. And they have put up a sign here saying, which is part of a customer centricity initiative, to say, well, we care as an organization, right? Which on first sight, you might be saying, well, this is actually fantastic, right? We show to our ground staff, on the shop floor staff, that that we need to care about our customer. So the idea is good, but then on second thought, you might be wondering, but what does it really mean? What does it mean for this person there on that production line, right? I mean, did she not care the day before when the sign wasn't there? And how does she need to be changing on how she cares to make sure that we comply with this new we care kind of principle? The other problem that I see here is that we could mean somebody else needs to take care, right? We always consist of at least two people, and we'll come back to that actually later on. Is it me that needs to be caring differently, or is it rather somebody else in the organization that needs to do and improve with regards to caring? So it's very ambiguous. It's not really, serving probably the purpose of changing behaviors. It might be more, a slogan that makes us feel good, but is not driving the change that we're after. Here's a little bit more of an exhaustive overview, and customer centricity is obviously all about values and behaviors that we want to show as supplier and especially sales organization towards our customers. So this is from a company's website. Again, I'm not going to talk about who it is. And I don't want you to read everything. I just want to highlight one particular point here, which is trust, which always comes up as well when we talk about customer centricity or interview people about customer centricity. The topic of trust always comes up. I build trust with my customers. I want to trust them and they should be trusting me. That is what customer centricity is all about. But what does trust mean? Trust is an outcome, right? How do you build trust? How do you make sure that what you did yesterday is changing or building, or you're changing your behavior and what you did today towards what you do tomorrow to improve the level of trust with your customer? What this organization is saying there on the slide is, well, we build relationships through authenticity and commitment, which again, I think makes us feel good, but it's also not very specific on what it means. So this, poster or this overview might be popping up in your coffee area in your office, or again on your shop floor, and we might be going past them as an employee and look at it and we can immediately relate to it. Of course we care. Trust sounds good. Clarity, Totally excellence. Yes, I'm an excellent worker. Safety, of course, safety is important. So you see what's happening here. We're self-comforting ourselves here. We were just reassuring patterns of behavior that we can all identify in our past patterns of behavior. We're not really addressing the elephant in the room, namely what has to change, that we're closing that gap that we currently have in the eye of the customer. Last example here for the day, which I find actually very interesting. A company that actually has removed the we and replaced it with I. And we come back to that later. Individual responsibility to take ownership for customer centricity is actually very important. So I do like that they changed the word we to the word I here. But then again, if you have a closer look on what they've outlined here, is again very top level. I do the right thing. As we said early on, nobody comes into the office in the morning, at least I hope not, deliberately doing the wrong thing. Everybody does the right thing. It's just the definition of what do I need to change to do the right thing that matters to the customer, right? I champion our customers. Well, who doesn't champion the customers, right? So most of these initiatives feel very top down, feel very much just a mean to articulate to the customer that we as an organization, as a supply organization, are doing something. Does it really result in us being more customer centric? Probably not. So what is the issue and problem with these approaches? I probably summarized this to a certain degree already. They feel very top down. It feels very much that a leadership team has decided our organization needs to be more customer centric. Let's put quickly something onto the shop floor, into the coffee area, onto our website to make sure that we're all aligned here. Does it really drive behaviors with regards to employees? Does it really capture the essence of customer centricity, similar to what we discussed early on? Does it really explain what customer centricity is? I have my doubts. So the gap exists on a different dimension then as well, right? So we have academia on one side, which has its challenges because being a bit too top level. And then we have those slogans. And I'm not saying and dismissing these slogans, they can actually be quite powerful. But there is still a gap between the academia and what's being then rolled out in organizations. And what the gap is and consists of is, well, we haven't really asked the customer what the customer wants us to do, specifically what the customer wants you to do, to be thinking and acting in a customer-centric way so that they perceive you as that supplier of choice and not just a provider by chance. So what is missing is the customer's expectations. What do my customers expect from me to do to be perceived as a customer-centric supplier? And as this, title of the webinar was, let's ask your customers, let's do exactly that, right? Let's ask your customer, what does customer centricity mean from your perspective, dear Mr. or Miss Customer? So if you would be putting this question forward to your customers that you're interacting with, you probably would be struggling to get a response. The first challenge would be, coming back to the definition of customer centricity, your customer probably doesn't know really what customer centricity is. Your customer might be struggling to articulate what they really need and want from you, right? It's not that your customer is not intelligent enough. Absolutely not. It's just that they're struggling with this concept on the spot, answering that question to you. They might be reflecting back on a situation which they found quite painful and say, well, last week you didn't deliver that truck on time to our Polish factory. Could you maybe change that? That would be actually customer centric. Or could you give me a 10% discount? That would be very customer centric of you. So you probably will be getting more situational feedback and not really the deep expectations that you're after. Now, some supply organizations try to solve this by sending out customer surveys to their customers. So let me just say a few words with regards to that, because obviously we're coming from the customer side. I've been a procurement professional all my career. We're dealing with a lot of buyers on your customer side. Nobody, absolutely nobody loves to fill in questionnaires from their customers. And only the ones that we do fill in, well, we probably have an agenda there. Why are we filling them in, right? So the feedback that you might be receiving from your customer surveys are heavily biased to customers that want you to change, but you probably are not getting any feedback from that customer that actually matter, that already dismissed you, that already put you and compartmentalized you into that bucket of, well, they never get it anyways, are not bother replying to their survey. So What shall we do then? Well, fear not, because over the past 16 years, we have observed your customers. We've been on your customer side. We've pretty much tried to figure out what it is that your customers are looking for in a customer-centric supplier. We've figured out what their expectations are. And those are applicable across industries and across geographies. And it boils down to 4 signals that are very important to your customer organization. Let me walk you through real quick what these 4 signals are that you need to showcase as an organization, as an individual, to be perceived as a customer-centric supplier. The first signal, very, very important, is the customers want to be generally cared for. Some of you might be saying, Jens, this is totally obvious. Why do we need to be talking about this? So let me share with you some verbatims, some sentences that your customers have shared with us and what they actually mean by that, right? To be crystal clear, that is actually more than you might think it is. So here's one sentence that comes up very often when you talk to customers. The supplier understands my business. They bring ideas and solutions before I even ask. And the crucial element here is the second part of the sentence. They bring ideas and solutions before I even ask. So caring from a customer's perspective is not you showing up at their doorstep, having an hour meeting, asking them what they need, you visiting them every quarter just to see how they are. It's not you inviting them to an innovation center or innovation day and hoping they see something interesting in your portfolio. It is you understanding their business and hinting them to something that they should be doing to be more successful in their respective reality. So that's a very important point of caring. And they offer a solution to a problem or an opportunity instead of just selling a product or service. So instead of just being there waiting for your customer to see on what you have to offer, you are offering a solution to a problem or to an opportunity that you have potentially spotted for them. You become a commercial consultant to their business. The relationship does not feel transactional, it feels invested. So caring is all about building that empathetic link, making yourself that consultant to your customer's business, knowing what their risks and opportunities are, identifying their business needs before you have that meeting with them, coming up with actions on how you can make them successful in their respective reality. That is what a customer is looking for in a caring supplier. So that's signal number 1. Signal number 2, and this is a very contentious topic amongst suppliers and the sales community, the topic about being competitive. Again, if I was to ask you now, are you a competitive supplier? You would immediately push him back. Jens, we're not the cheapest, but you know what? We create a lot of value. That's the reason why we're not the cheapest. And we will never be the cheapest, right? There's immediately when it comes to being competitive, you have the price topic comes into your mind and salespeople become defensive. And this is what your customers are sensing. You're not sending the right signal here when it comes to be competitive. So what does your customers mean? What do they expect from you? They don't expect you to be the cheapest. Absolutely not. What they mean by being competed for is the supplier knows I have options and they act like it. They never stop earning my business. So the biggest anxiety that your customers have is that as soon as the ink is dry on the contract, you will never, they will never hear from you again. You pretty much are of the attitude, well, we have a 2-year deal. I don't need to look into any kind of efficiency gains or driving simplifications because, we have this in the bag for the next 2 years. And at the same time, your customer sees all these beautiful other options, these other beautiful suppliers out there that they could have worked with, but they're stuck with you. So you want to avoid this feeling, this anxiety, this perception arising in your customer. You want to proactively address that they're not even having these thoughts about you. What it also means is that they're always visibly try to catch up with their competition. So actually your customers want you to talk about your competition and they want you to articulate on what you're going to do to catch up with their next best alternative. Again, that doesn't mean that you always need to become better than what the next best alternative offers, but they want you to acknowledge that there's options out there and that you have a plan that you execute on to catch up with that next best alternative that they have. They address weaknesses compared to my next best alternative proactively. And the last word here is very important. This needs to happen proactively. You've all been in that situation where maybe a procurement professional reaches out to you. You're not competitive any longer, supplier. What are you going to do about it? Then it's too late. You want to do this proactively. You want to be showcasing you're not complacent. You understand this signal that this customer is seeking for, and you address it proactively. Customers look for signals that the supplier is committed to improving. And here, again, the standard response that we get from suppliers and sales managers, we send this feedback form out to our customers, asking them what we can be doing better. Unfortunately, this is not what your customers are seeking for. What they want to have is pretty much a sensation as described in this sentence here. Every year, working with a supplier gets easier. They raise issues before I do. The supplier looks to improve proactively and anticipates feedback. So you, in the back of your mind, have an improvement plan where you know exactly the weaknesses of the relationship and you know exactly what needs to happen to make things better. They treat the relationship as something worth developing continuously. And let me just say one thing about improvement plans, because I've seen many throughout my career. And an improvement idea that you articulate as a supplier saying, if the customer were only to qualify another production site of ours, or if the customer would only be doing X, Y, that, our relationship could be so much better, is not improving continuously with your customer. You need to acknowledge their reality. If they are constrained, resource constrained, or they have difficulties to push maybe another production site to be qualified in your portfolio, that is the reality that you need to live with. So what are other ideas on how you can improve the status quo? That is the approach and that is the attitude that your customers are expecting. Lastly, but also very importantly, customers look for signals that they are generally responded to. When I contact my suppliers, something happens. I get answered by the right person in the right way. The supplier knows my stakeholders and how to respond to their needs. And this is something very crucial, right? Normally, especially when we key account managers, when we, sales people dealing with people in head offices on the customer side, we normally tend to gravitate towards them only, right? And forget a little bit of the other stakeholders and touch points that we have as a supply organization with that customer. And that could be very detrimental to the relationship. Your customer expects you to respond to these various touch points well and to be able to address those needs in the best way possible. So the customer wants to be responded to in the way they feel most comfortable with, on their time frame, in their format. So these are the 4 signals that your customers expect from you, from a customer-centric supplier. So to summarize, what your customers expect from you then is very simple. They want a supplier that cares, competes, improves, and responds. What we need to be doing now, and what we normally lack to do, is to translate this now, the understanding of what customer centricity means from our customers, on how we want to operate as an organization. What does it mean now for our organization, right? We need to define a common language to address these signals. We want to permeate these signals into our organization. And this can be fairly straightforward by just saying our overall goal to be customer-centric as an organization is we win with our customers by caring for their needs proactively. We win with our customers by competing for their business continuously. We win with our customers by improving the relationship permanently. And we win with our customers by responding to their needs swiftly. So we combining the win-win approach by saying we're not doing this for the sake of, we're doing this because we want to have a return on our investment. And we address clearly the signals that our customers want us to address. And we give an explanation to our organization, to our sales teams potentially, what customer centricity is from the customer's point of view. So that's the first essential step, defining a customer-centric mindset, a pathway on how these customer expectations are translated into a common language that we can use as an organization across departments, quite frankly. This is not only linked to the sales organization. There's one problem though. And the problem with we is you, right? And we alluded to this point a little early on already. As soon as we say we think we're off the hook as individuals, right? And including myself, right? This is totally normal. Whenever we see we have to do something, well, I've done my job, it's probably the other person that needs to do it. So the reason why customer centricity initiatives fail, that a lot of companies keep it at this holistic we level and don't move into the individual I. What is the individual accountability that we need to drive in our teams to make sure that every person in the sales team, but also in other functions, acknowledge that they need to take action to become customer-centric as an overall organization. So these signals from a organizational level now need to be translated and permeated onto the individual level. So we want to make sure that our individual employees define their actions on how they care, compete, improve, and respond. And this could look in the following way, that you as leaders and as managers sit down with your reportees and ask them, okay, so this is our principles of customer centricity, what we as organization want to achieve. We want to care, compete, improve, and respond, because those are the signals that our customers are expecting us to address. What are you going to do now as sales executive, as sales team leader, as sales professional to address these signals in your area of responsibility? You're not going to be, save the world on your own. Absolutely not. But you can drive individual actions to care, to compete, to improve, and to respond. And this applies also to other functions. What can you do as operations team to care, to compete, to improve, to respond? What can you do as individual line manager to care, to compete, to improve, and to respond? So the individual accountability is an essential element to activate customer centricity throughout the organization. Last issue that I would like to highlight to you, though. The problem with what is the missing how, right? And that is a crucial element, because you might be saying, Jens, okay, this makes sense that I define individually what I need to be doing, but you could come up with actions here, with goals that are not customer-centric at all. You might be saying, well, I care about my customer by having a meeting with them on a Friday afternoon. I have an improvement plan, which might not be customer-centric. So the issue here is that we need to provide help and support to the individuals to understand how they do it in the best way possible, how they care, how they compete, how they improve, and how they respond. So how do I care well? How do I compete well? How do I improve, and how do I respond well? That is really the question that we need to be answering. And the essence or the answer to this, we need to build competencies and skills that cater exactly to these issues, right? And this is obviously what we do for a living at FIVIS. We train sales teams, we train supply organizations to develop these competencies and skills to be able to know how they activate caring, competing, improving, and responding on an individual level. But what it boils down to, these skills and competencies that we teach out, is three things. It's the competency and the skill to fully understand what my customer in my area of responsibility expects from me to care. It is the competency and the skill to be able to analyze the current situation with the customer and to then come up with the action that you as the individual need to be taking to drive the relationship forward, to address the expectation that your customer has with regards to caring, competing, improving, and responding. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of the presentation here today, and I obviously would like to leave some time for Q&A. I can only advise you, start filling the gap, because the gap is real, and you might be actually confronted with a gap without even knowing it. You might be part of this 80% of suppliers that think that they're customer-centric, but effectively they're not being perceived that way. The first step that you need to be doing is to really reflect on what does customer-centricity really mean from a customer's perspective. What is the customer-centric language that we need to be introducing into our organization to get rid of these slogans that we might be using today? Take that poster, that billboard in your coffee area, and take it into a team room with your colleagues, maybe with your management team, and discuss, are these slogans actually reflecting what our customers are expecting from us, or are we just talking to ourselves? That is a great starting point to trigger a conversation. Are we actually thinking and acting in a customer-centric way, or are we effectively just fooling ourselves? The second step that you should be taking, and you can be taking just after this webinar, is, well, to drive some individual responsibility. To no longer just say, well, customer centricity is something that the big boss is doing, or we need to have a leadership initiative first. No, you as a team can come together. You as an individual can reflect, today, what do I do to care, to compete, to improve, and to respond? How do I address these signals effectively as a sales professional? Where might I be lacking in effectively addressing that? And obviously, delivering support to your teams on how they can do this in the best way possible is the key to success. Okay. I obviously would like to disclose to you on how customer-centric you are. And Ivan did obviously the calculation there for us in the background. So let me reveal, Ivan just sent that over to me. Thank you very much. So you are assessing yourself as a 3.5, 3.6 roughly. Not bad, but again, maybe you assessed yourself a bit too positively compared to where maybe your customer is seeing you. Again, these were just 3 questions out of a whole catalog of 25, but at least you get a little bit of feel on how you see yourself and maybe where you need to do things slightly differently. If this was of interest, ladies and gentlemen, we have also a white paper that covers this topic. You can download it by scanning this QR code or just type in paper into the Zoom window now, into the chat window, and we'll send you a copy after today's call. But I would like to bring back in Ivan, who probably has collected a lot of questions from you so that we can answer a few in the remaining 10 minutes roundabout that we still have. Over to you, Ivan.
Thanks, Jens. Here comes the first one. Listening. Can sales be customer-centric without a customer-centric organization?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And I think often raised by individuals. I think we addressed this or alluded to this point early on as well, where a lot of people saying, well, if my operations teams are not being more customer-centric or more flexible to schedule a production run for my customer, how can I offer a better service to my customer? It's impossible. And there's an element of truth to it. But as sales teams, we are the custodian of the customer. We pretty much are the spearhead of the interaction between us as supplier and the customer organization. So we own, to a certain degree, customer centricity. We own bringing in the voice of the customer into our own organization. So by us being proficient in customer centricity, being able to activate that voice of the customer, reliably in or vis-a-vis our peer functions, will allow us to take them with us on that journey of change and driving positive change towards more of a customer-centric organization. So the bottom line here is, yes, it is possible. And it often actually starts with the sales team to make a meaningful change, to become more customer-centric, to then bring in other functions to take their journey on together with them to become that more customer-centric supplier that you want to become.
Okay, here comes next one. What are the skills and competencies we need in sales to care, for example?
Okay. So it comes down to the last point. How do I activate the caring element of that customer centricity model that we described, right? So there's various different skills and competencies that you can acquire. The fundamental goal that you have is to thoroughly understand your customer's environment. So what we, for instance, use in our courses and trainings is a value chain mapping tool. That tool is used actually by your customers to understand their environment, to understand what their business needs are, to understand what they consider as risk and opportunities. So by using a tool or a skill that your customers are using to identify their challenges and their opportunities, is obviously a very beautiful tool for you to use as a supplier to figure out how your customer thinks about their own challenges and their needs, right? So again, a very specific skill that I'm a big fan of and that we use is value chain mapping, identifying risk and opportunities along that value chain that your customers have, and thinking of what can I do as the supplier, as the salesperson, to address this need. That is what caring is all about. That's how you activate a caring mindset. Good question.
Okay, Jens, thanks for the answer. Here's next one. Can you give examples of caring behaviors of salespeople that are not perceived as customer-centric by their customers?
Okay. Yeah, so obviously I'm not being too controversial here, but because you might be doing this, right? So again, meeting your customers every quarter, every month, or whatever interval you're using is not customer-centric per se. Showing your face in your customer's office, in the factory, doesn't mean that you're customer-centric. Sending them a Christmas card is not customer-centric. Sending or responding to their email 5 minutes after they send it does not necessarily mean that you're customer-centric. So what is customer-centric is to understand what they expect you to do with regards to caring, competing, improving, and responding. To be able to analyze what it is that is important to them in these 4 areas and to drive actions toward those. If this includes meeting your customer 10 times a year, amazing. But if you are saying, well, my interpretation of customer centricity is to show my face 10 times a year, if the customer likes it or not, it's just making yourself feel comfortable, but not driving, a customer centricity mindset that is perceived to be customer centric from your customer account's point of view. Okay, good question. Great, guys. I think we're close to the hour.
Jens, do we have time maybe for another one?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, maybe 2 minutes left. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Here it is. How do you address customers who do not seem to be interested in customer-centric relationship, but challenge mostly the prices and let apart the rest of the relationship?
I would like to investigate that, because this is normally a very defensive statement by a supplier and sales manager, and sorry if I'm being very black and white here, that perceives the customer not to play ball. The customer doesn't understand us. They don't understand the value. They're just pushing us on price. There's probably a procurement person that just wants another 10% discount. Always pressure, always not responding to emails, not being available for a meeting. I'm doing everything I can as a sales manager. The customer just doesn't get it. I would be challenging that, right? Because yes, a price always needs to be discussed. There's no doubt about it. But what your customer is looking out for, are you addressing proactively these signals of caring, competing, improving, and responding? And oftentimes, one of these 4 areas are not being addressed. And that is the reason why you have this very challenging relationship where your customer sees you just as a commodity supplier, and you probably see them just as a commodity customer as well. So there's two potential scenarios here. One, this is a customer that you should be putting on the back burner, as we discussed in the definition under customer centricity. Only focus on those that really matter. Or it is actually a customer that you should be focusing on, but you're just reacting very defensively on tactics that sound very familiar as an ex-procurement guy, that procurement imposes on you, right? So be very careful on the tactical behavior that you see on the day-to-day versus what is possible and achievable on a more strategic level. And here you need to be asking yourself the question, are you showing those actions of caring, competing, improving, responding proactively? Because probably the answer is no. And that's the reason why you're being dismissed as a supplier that is just replaceable and can be treated maybe in a little bit more tactical way than you want it to be. A bigger topic, we probably don't have enough time here today, but hopefully I could answer it at least a little bit here. Ivan, thank you very much for that. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're reaching the hour here. Thank you again for being with us on this very, very warm summer day in London. Thank you for spending the hour with us. Hopefully you'll learn something meaningful here today. Follow us on LinkedIn if you want to be in touch and stay in touch with us. And we hopefully see you soon in some of our future webinars. Thank you guys. Have a good rest of the week and see you soon.